Okay, so now we have the clay smacked down, and I'm just going to wet my hand and take my finger and push this down. If you look at this, what I'm trying to do here is to push this down in such a way that I don't trap any air underneath here. So I push this down to the wheel head, and now ready to start taking this up and down. And probably most beginning students would have about 2/3 of this clay. You should have a piece of clay that's about this large in relationship to your hands. So now I wet the clay, and what's important is to keep this so that it slides through your hands. If it starts to dry out, it can cause a lot of problems. So you want to make sure it slides through your hand. Now, the technique that I teach, and every person that's been throwing for any length of time will have used their hands a little bit differently to move the clay, but pretty much it's the moving of the clay, the end result is the same. What I'm trying to do, and this technique was actually developed or used by, I learned it from George Geyer. Guy could throw 50 pounds of clay standing on his head. And you use your body weight to move the clay, so you don't have to be strong. First thing I'm going to do is try to get rid of all these bumps. So I'm just going to put my elbow inside my hip, and this is really important. Put your elbow, find your hip bone, slide your elbow in there, and you should be able to push on this, and it's not going to go anywhere because your derriere is on the seat, and whatever you weigh is holding that down. So then I move up, and I just move into this slowly with my body weight, just to kind of take the major part of the bumps out there. So I'm using my body weight. Always using my body weight whenever possible. Now, something about the clay, it seems that when the clay is going around, it doesn't make any difference where you put your hands because it's going around in a circle. But the fact is that this clay from 12 o'clock over to here is coming into you, and this clay is going away from you. So what I want to do is I want to use the power of the wheel as it comes in to move the clay. So what I'm going to do is make a little ridge at the bottom with this part of my hand. And one of the things that I had my students do once upon a time was to just make a mark here so when you put your hand here you know that you're using this part. So elbow inside the hip. This is at 7 o'clock. Don't get over here. You want to stay at 7 o'clock. The clay is coming into you. This hand, same thing, this part of the hand, 1 o'clock, so they're opposite each other. This is moving in, and you're going to push the clay up. This is going to hold it up against it. So now, I like to have the wheel going kind of a medium speed, and when I'm throwing, when I'm centering, it really doesn't have to, I don't have to have my foot on the pedal here. So I lean in with my body weight, and I push under until I get this little indentation. So this rides in the indentation at 7, this rides in the indentation at 1. So then all I'm doing is with my hip, I push up, and this hand is pulling the clay up against there. And the first time up and down, it's going to have twists, and it's going to look a little strange. And you'll see by the time I push this up and down 3 times, it'll be very smooth. And even though you've wedged your clay, this gets the clay in better shape for the throwing. Okay, now, I like to make a little, after you get used to the technique, you don't need to do this, but in the beginning, make a little bullseye there. You're going to put this joint from your thumb over there, and your thumb is going to be curved like this, because we want to match the curve of the clay. So fingers around here, but just to keep the hand, it helps keep the thumb in this position. Then, a little faster. This right hand, the little finger cups between the thumb, this joint and this joint on the thumb over there, and all the work is being done here. So now, watch my shoulders. I brace and I lean with my shoulders, and the clay will move away from me back into the body of the clay, and as it gets dry, one of the things you can do is hold a sponge in your hand like this, and lean across and push down. And I have to be careful. I don't want to fold this over. And you'll see it's a little rough the first time. Now when I get down to here, anything from the side, I want to flatten it, so I'm going to use the flat part of my hand. Elbow inside the hip again, because I don't want to work hard to do this. And at 7 o'clock, I'm helping with this hand, keep it in place. I lean in, and then I move back up. And it still has some wobbles in it. Just hold firm. And I like to scrape this little bit of clay away from here because I find it distracting. So, okay, now, you see that I didn't push it down flat. And I'll show you what happens when you push it down flat. And this is a major problem for students when they first start throwing. You start bringing this up, the clay on the outside moves up faster than the clay on the inside. Now you have something to deal with that you probably do not have the skills to take care of. Once you've been throwing for a while, you won't make this mistake. But it's possible. I'm just pushing down, and I'm going to push in from the side with my body weight, and then kind of pull this together. But if you can follow the technique very closely, it eliminates a lot of problems like that. Okay, now, second time up, elbow inside the hip. Make sure it's not just, if you can push this around, you can see if I have this on my leg, the skin will move, muscles move. The hip bone is not going anywhere. Elbow inside your hip, 7 o'clock here, 1 o'clock here. Lean in and get the indentation. And then move up with the hip, and you can see the clay is much smoother, and also it feels much smoother. Then take this back down. Make your bullseye for a while, just to remind you. This joint from the thumb will want to be in back of the clay. You're not pushing down, you're leaning across. And I'm going to do this. So, this joint, thumb's at 7 o'clock. Cup your right hand, put your little finger in there, kind of half a fist. Now you have your arms against your body, and you're just going to lean across, and as the clay slowly moves away from you, and get a rhythm with the clay. If it feels smooth, it means you're probably doing something good. If it seems to be resisting you, lighten up a little bit, don't push so hard. If it's not moving, lean a little bit more. Now, I see I have this rough spot on the side. Flat area, elbow inside the hip, lean in, smooth it out a little bit, move up. So now, this will be let's see how, most of the time 3 times is plenty. So elbow inside the hip, move up, keep that clay pulled up against there. As soon as you get to the top, every time, as soon as you run out of clay, left thumb over the top, right thumb over the top of it, hold it, let it go around. Now watch this. It looks pretty good, doesn't it? But if you take your hand away too fast, you're always going to have this, and you'll have to catch up with it. So what you're going to do is hold it, back away till you feel it's just sliding underneath there, and then take your hand away. Now, after you've been throwing a while, you can fix all this stuff, but in the beginning, you really need to be careful about making things, creating situations you have to fix. So now this is the third time down, and it should be pretty smooth. The left thumb joint in the middle. This is cupped, so it fits over that curve. Right hand between these two, just helping. The work is being done here. I'm just bracing. So, lean across. And because this is the third time, I'm going to push it down a little flatter. But you see, I'm pushing it down so it pushes the clay back into the body of the clay. What I don't want to do is have a thing of clay sticking out here. If I fold that over, the slip on this part of the clay and the slip here doesn't allow it to attach. So at some point you'll be doing something and a big ring of clay will come off. And so in order to not create that, I take it down to here, then I push in on this, and again, anything from the side is always this flat part. So I push in, I'm going to move back up to the top, flatten it off a little bit. Now, don't open it up at this point. The technique that I teach, you're going to take it down towards a little flatter. Now, you don't always want to make pots that have wide bases, but I'll show you how you take that in. So this, the one thing about this technique is you can use this technique to throw small, or you can use this technique to throw large amounts of clay, and that's the beauty. You don't have to change as you start to throw larger pots. So, it's not that larger is better. It's always design that makes a difference. But a lot of people who work with clay want to throw larger. By using this technique, it really helps. This arms down on the legs, so my upper body weight is resting on my legs. I'm over the top of the clay, my nose right over the top of that. This joint is going to be right in the middle. So if you look over at the board for a moment, that board that we looked at, you can see that right now we're at C. We're going to get to C here in just a second. So this is how we get to the C part. Now, as I push down, I let my thumb move out like this, and it's the fist that's doing the work. If I had a stick shaped like this curve of my thumb, I could use that too. So I push this down. This clay dries out a little fast. And then, you see this clay here? I move that towards 7 o'clock with my fist. And I take it over the edge a little bit. And then, this is where we don't want to fold this down. Now I take this part and I cup this a little and I push in slowly. And I push that overhang back into the clay. And once I push that in, it's not down to the wheel head yet, but I'm going to do that step one more time. Then, this part, I just keep a little pressure on it, I move back up, and I kind of smooth it out. I don't want to leave it with any work to be done. I want it to be perfectly centered. Now I'm going to do that one more time, and because I pushed it down quite a bit, it doesn't have to be that much. I push in, and then I slide that towards 7 o'clock. You can see this little thing here moving out. I take it around the edge, and when you get to here, what I do is I put my hand here, and this part of my palm, I push that down halfway to the wheel head, hold it, let it go around. You always hold it, let it go around, relax, take your hand away. Now, from the side, again, I come in here, it's 7 o'clock, I push it into the clay as it comes around to me. And I push in and I watch this until that clay gets down to the wheel head. Once it gets there, I hold it, let it go around, relax, come back up here, and take my hand away. So now, it's actually a little lower than C, which is fine. But you see it has a wide base on it. You're not always going to want to make a pot that has a wide base like this, but we're going to take it in eventually. Now, next step, arms down on the legs. I'm going to make a V shape here. The idea behind this is to open this up, so I just push in slowly and give the clay an opportunity to spread out. Nothing happening here, just fingers have to be somewhere, that's where they are. Take this down to where I have maybe 3/8 of an inch of clay in there. Now, you can stop this and check it. And it appears to be a little more than that. Let's see. That's about right. So it's about that thick. It probably would be better if it's a little thicker, but I'm going to show you something that you can do if you take it down too far. So let's assume that you take your thumb and you take it all the way down to where it's at the wheel head. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my finger inside here and push in. And what's going to happen is it's going to take some clay over towards the middle. And then I just pull that in, and that fills up the hole. Or you can just stop the wheel, take some clay, and fill it up. So now, check this. See what we got. So, I have about that much. Now, next step, normally this would be a V shape. Next step, get some water in here, and arms down on the legs, and you probably have to scoot back a little bit now. And what I'm going to do now is, my fingers are like this, I'm going to pull back straight. And what I want to do, now if I just take the natural motion of the hand, you can see eventually it would come down and cut into the clay. You have to pull back straight. So that's what I'm going to do now. Get some water in here, and I'm going to pull this back to where it's a little over 3 fingers wide, because that's what the next step is. So now I can get my hand in there to do the next step. I'm going to put some water in here so as I cut back, and let's look back over at over here. So now I've done this step, the kind of the V shape. Now I've created this, and when I stop, I make a little indentation here. It helps me get this started. And one of the things that you're going to find, because the wheel head is here, the clay is going to have a tendency to push your fingers up. And if you're not careful, you'll end up over here and you'll have clay that's an inch thick. It's not the end of the world, but it's an inch of clay you could use to be making the pot probably at least an inch taller. So right now we're here, and I'm going to cut back underneath and create this little space here. So I'll get some water in here, and this, I'm just turning back like this, and the idea is to come back so it's flat. And once again, when you're working with clay, it's always, what is the clay telling you about how you're doing? If it feels like it's resisting, you're probably moving too fast. So you see how far that's back. I'm hoping that this here is about this thick. So, and at this point, this is where you would move across the bottom and kind of smooth it out and compress the bottom a little bit. I'm going to slow this down just a little bit. Now, I think this next step, there's a couple of things you can do here. I like to just lock these together. This opening between here and here is the thickness of the wall. And I just push with my hip and move it up. Now, the other thing that you can do, and I'm going to do that here, it's easier, is you can take this and just pull this up with your hand, and I prefer the other because I've done it for a long time. This is actually a little easier. Now, I'll show you. At this point, we want the clay to start to be like this. This is a much more stable form than this, and not only that, but if it's straight up and down, when you start making the knuckle pass on it, the draw, probably it's going to have a tendency to go out like this. If it's in like this, it's a much more stable form, and it doesn't have a tendency to flare out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a fix-it position. I use this every time I throw. Right hand, you want these fingers to be straight. The left hand, the fingertips are going to be on the fingernails. This touches, and this just barely touches, and this is at 1 o'clock, and I simply pull in a little bit, and I'm going to bring that back in. Clay is a little dry, but so you want to stay at like 12:30. Remember, this clay is coming into you. This clay is going away from you. We want to use the clay coming into us to move that clay. Now, I'm going to do a hand pass here, and I'm also going to push in at the base a little bit. So the way I do that is I just kind of take this part of my hand, and at about 5 o'clock, I lean into the clay as it's coming into me. So you see, I've taken this in probably 1.5 inches just by doing that. Now, I'm going to do a hand pass because this is thick. Now, basically, if you're throwing large amounts of clay, the thicker this is, the larger area you need out here to help hold it. So this is thick enough that I'm going to use this part of my palm, always fingers on the inside, and I'm just going to move up. Let's try this out pretty quickly here. I'm just going to move up with this. I'm just going to move up with this and move up and in. When I get to the top, this backs away and this comes around. And I use the fix-it position to pull it in again. I'm going to make a little knuckle pass on this. The wall is still a little thick. But push out and get the bulge and move up and in. And what's happening here, when I get to this point, I back away with this and I turn my knuckle around and it kind of flattens out that part of the wall. Now, let's go back over to the board and talk about the knuckle pass, because that's where we are now. Now, the idea behind this eventually becoming this is the wall is all the same thickness. So when I get ready to make the hand pass, knuckle pass, finger pass, whatever it is, I put them in the position that feels correct and I simply pull through the wall. I don't have to be concerned about is it too thin and I have to back away here, or it's thick here, I have to push out a little bit more. If this is all the same, I can put the same pressure on and move through it. And I think that most people who have this down will tell you this is really one of the most incredible parts of throwing, is to feel that when the clay is moving the way it's supposed to, you stretch it out and it goes back in. It's very, very smooth. It should just, it's really kind of magical. So now, check your wall and see what you have. It's actually a little thicker at the top, so I can come back in here and I'm going to, my fingers on the inside like this, I push out. It's not this, you can cut a hole right in the wall. What I want is to be touching here and I'm going to push out, and eventually the clay is all going to be touching here. The knuckle on the outside is at a 45-degree angle. I like to make sort of a 7. I put the tip of my finger on this knuckle back here because I'm going to be using this to raise the wall. Don't put your thumb in there, because when you get to the top, there's going to be an overhang here. And so how do you get your thumb out of here with the overhang to get it up here where it belongs? Now, watch again. This is the fix-it position. And if your clay is centered, you can do this forever. And it's really something you need to know. And it's a feeling you need to know that you're moving with the speed of the wheel, and that the clay is kind of all helping you out a little too. All right. So now I'm going to make another knuckle pass on this from the bottom. And again, I'm going to push in at the base. So this part of the palm, I just push in slowly, and you can see that it probably, each time you do that, it probably goes in another, at least an inch. And so I'm going to pull this in a little bit using the fix-it position to make it so that the top is a little smaller than the base. And at this point, I probably need to stand up. And of course, you always have to make sure that there's plenty of water on. And if you pour the bucket on, there's only going to be so much water that's going to stay on the clay. And also at this point, I'm going to take the water out of the inside. Now, if this were a bottle and I were trying to get in there, I have a little stick that I made, a piece of doweling with a sponge tied to the end of it. I could stick in there if I can't get my hand in there. All right, now, so you see the bulge is coming out. That's my fingers. You can see where it's touching. And then I simply move up with that. And because it's pretty much all the same, all I have to do is just keep going with it. As soon as I can get my thumb out here to help brace it, I do that. Come up. And then when I get to the top, I have to back away. I bring my thumb around. That helps level the top. And the knuckle comes up and straightens that up. This just backs away with it. Let's see, I guess I need to, okay, let's stop for just a second.